Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people here. I was actually hoping to, I was saying this earlier, that it would rain or at least be cold and dreary out, but no luck with that. But we've struggled every year with figuring out when to actually host this event, and it seems inevitably we run into some problems with it being Easter or 1st of April or grants are due the night before and things like that. Or my Metro card expired, so I almost was late because of that, because I realized I couldn't get on the... So I'm going to start my introduction to Philippe Rahm with a few words real quick. I was relating to Nada, I don't know in what context, how my wife always teases me that whenever I'm in a lecture hall or in any space actually where something is presented and the lights go out, immediately I fall asleep. And of course, the most acute case of this is as I remember, when I was in school, in architecture school, and we had, I forgot what it was called, HVAC or mechanical something. And of course, inevitably, I always fell asleep because the lectures always started with these graphs and all of these strange words, acronyms that we had no idea what they actually meant. And of course, I fell asleep. So in thinking about Philippe's work, I imagine him as sort of the ideal teacher I wish I would have had that perhaps could explain why I fell asleep. Part of it, of course, was because I never got enough sleep. But I think there's other factors were involved there that had to do with not just the physical, obviously the visible elements in that room, but the air quality, the noise, and all of these things. So I was really happy to discover Philippe's work and actually see a hope in maybe ways that we can start to teach, particularly now since I started teaching interior design. Yes, I'm still an assistant professor of interior design. Perhaps opening up a space for interior design to operate in that in this long quest now of getting beyond taste and aftertaste, to really start examining these things that a lot of people call empty space, that Robert Irwin so nicely spoke about last night, the thoughts we heard from Richard Neutra, that we're still actually trying to grasp with what actually happens in the thing that we call space. And I can't think of nobody better to sort of give us an introduction to this. The one part that I found in Philippe's writing that I thought was very provocative, I was just reading a sentence out of here. Might it be possible to imagine climatic phenomena such as convection, conduction, or evaporation, for example, as new tools for architectural composition? Could vapor, heat, or light become the new bricks of contemporary construction? Now, all you have to do is replace or sort of move a few words slightly, and the question if it's architecture, construction, or if it's bricks, as a way to find, I think, this field that we've been struggling with to articulate as to where interior design, or great new aspect of interior design, I think, could actually be in ways which we then can participate again with architects. And I think it's particularly in this moment now with passive house and a lot of new regulations or ideas about how to get better performing buildings. Architects are really busy right now working with the envelope, and some people are doing fantastic work with that. And I think particularly Banish's office is doing very interesting things where they're trying to get everything out into the wall, daylighting, air, the whole mechanical system, energy production, and all of that. But my hope there is really that in all of this, it really opens up a bigger space for interior design to operate in new ways. And as I mentioned, I think Philippe Rahm is really, in my mind, pointing the way to how start to think about that. Philippe Rahm was born in 1967, studied at the Federal Polytechnical School of Lausanne and Zurich. He obtained his architectural degree in 1993. He works currently in Paris and Lausanne. In 2002, he was chosen to represent Switzerland at the 8th Architectural Biennale in Venice as one of the 20 Architects Manifesto chosen by Aaron Betsky. He is a nominee or was a nominee in 2009 for the Ordos Prize in China and was in 2008 in the top 10 ranking of the International Chernikov Prize in Moscow. In 2007, he had a personal exhibition at the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal. He has participated in a number of exhibitions worldwide, and I'm not even going to start reading this, and I think this is an older edition. The list is really quite extensive. Philippe Rahm was a resident at the Villa Medici in Rome 2000. He was headmaster of Diploma Unit 13 at the AA School in London, visiting professor in Mendrisio Academy of Architecture in Switzerland, at the ETH in Lausanne, and was guest professor at the School of Architecture at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts of Copenhagen. He's won numerous awards, is busy in his practice, and I think he's currently also teaching at Princeton as a visiting scholar. Please help me welcome Philippe Rahm.
Thank you for the introduction. I will do two lectures, one lecture today and another lecture the 11th of April in Princeton. So I will do two different lectures. So this one will be focused on more on interior design and more maybe older work, more focused on the physiological aspect of architecture. And next week it will be more on my current architectural project. So please don't think that I'm only doing this. It's important to understand that it is a real an important part of my work. It starts in '96, and maybe it's a work until 2005, 2006, and after I switched to some more meteorological approach of architecture. But everything I will show today, it's really important. It's like the basic aspect of my work. And I try to identify a little what was my work at the starting point. And I think there is a modern idea in my work. I think I always try to decompose a reality. I think it's a 19th century idea to destroy the reality and to find the different component of the reality, like chemical component, like physical component, and I think if you think about Charles Baudelaire, French poet, says that what it is invention, what it is poesy, it is to destroy what you see, and to understand that it's composed by different element, and after you take this different element and you rebuild something new, a new reality that is not than it was before, but something else. And sometimes you could destroy the reality and keep only one or two components of this reality and do something together. And it's maybe the work of Claude Monet, the Impressionist painting was like this, to destroy the image and to understand that there is some light component, and to rebuild it, but maybe in another way, in a less wall aspect. And so in my work, I'm always in this position. I always try to understand what there is behind the reality. What are the real or the microscopic or the physiological reason to think or to invent the reality. So I will try to show a lot of projects so quickly, and each project will focus on one element. And so I start with this. I call this beyond senses. It's an idea that maybe the five senses, view, the ear, it's not the most important senses to understand the reality. Maybe there is a lot of other sensation, like invisible sensation, like hormonal sensation, like thyroid perception, maybe. And I think it's interesting to understand through this very microscopic scale to understand the reality. And for example, I was interested into iodine, this chemical element. And I understand that what's happened during at the beginning of the 19th century, we discover the iodine. It's a French doctor that discovers this, and he understands that we need some iodine. If you don't have iodine, you have some disease, you have some goitre and some problem. And so, and we understand that iodine is in the sea, in the water of the sea, and so it's what's happened. It's there is from this discovery, from this scientific discovery, we understand that we some people have to go to the sea and go to, and it was the invention of the tourism. It was the invention of the Brighton or in the or Biarritz in France or everything. All this new urban planning of the 19th century with all this new city near the sea, or also in the mountain where there is some spring with iodine inside the water. It's become it changed completely the relation to the landscape, and this is also the invention of the tourist, the idea that you don't stay always in the city, you go to the sea, and when you arrive to the sea, so there is a casino, there is a new program that appear, and also and so it's you could understand that why we go to the sea, why we go during the summer, we take the airplane to go to the sea. It's maybe a simple reason. It's iodine reason. It's because the doctors say, okay, you need to go to take some iodine, because if you don't have iodine, you have some disease. And it was in Switzerland, for example, there is a Crétin des Alpes. It's crazy people from the mountain because they have a lack of iodine, and so it's changed it completely the reality. And so, and my idea was to do a kind of winter beach, to create a beach. But I was decomposing the beach, and I say the beach is what it is really. It's not. It's two simple elements. The first, it is iodine. So I create a kind of cloud of iodine with a very dilution of iodine into water. So you could take the iodine into you. And the second reason was the ultraviolet, because we also discover later that we need ultraviolet A to create the synthesis of vitamin D, and it's why if you look to the old photography of the 19th century with people to go to the beach, there are a lot of clothes on them, and after they become to take off the clothes because they understand that you need also the light from the sun, the ultraviolet ray on the skin to create the synthesis of vitamin D. So we become to be naked at the beach. So it changed completely also our relation to the. So I think these two, the iodine and ultraviolet, are the driving force of the landscape of the beach and so I create a kind of landscape of ultraviolet, like a horizon of ultraviolet of light with this cloud. And so the idea was to rebuild a kind of beach with these two elements, without the other, because the other it's maybe something that come after, and it was realized in France, and it was a very important public success, and it was interesting to see this. Another perception could be the melatonin or endocrine perception. And when I did, it is an old project of 99, and it's called iweather.org. And it was, at this time, it was really old, the question of electronic architecture with Greg Lynn and Asymptote, first project working on immaterial computer. Where it was very important, and I was invited to an exhibition with them, and my position was to say that okay, everything become now immaterial inside the computer, but there is still a physiological link. It is a screen with the eye. So everything could be abstract in the computer, but you need the physical relationship between the eye and the computer, and it's through an electromagnetic wave that come from the screen and arrive on you. And so I start to be interesting into the quality of the light. What is a physical relationship between the screen and the light? And so we understand that there is a lot of physiological relation from the body to the light. And we work with Anna Wirtz-Justice, some people from the university in Basel, involved into the circadian cycle and all melatonin things. So here you could see that there is some what we call circadian cycle. It means that there is secretion of some hormone inside the body during the night. For example, it is a dark blue, and no during the day. And there is variation of melatonin, prolactin, cortisol, different hormones that change during the day. And there is something very interesting. It was Alfred Lewy in 1980 in Science. It was published in Science. And he shows that you have a lot of melatonin during the night. So you could see that when the night arrives, the melatonin rate grow up inside the body. And what he shows that if you, at 2 a.m. in the morning, during the night, you turn on the light, a bright light, you receive a bright light on the eye, so you could see that the level of melatonin fall down and it rise up if you close the light. And the reason that there is a link between light and the retina and the pineal gland, and it block or not the melatonin if there is some light. And I was really interested by this because, as an architect, light is a very traditional element. It's like like Le Corbusier say, architecture, it's volume under the light, or when you play with shadow and light, or with natural light. So I was interesting because it was something that changed the way to think about the light, because the light was not only an immaterial element, something inorganic, but it became organic and also biologic. And so I like this idea that architecture is not separate from the body, it's not inorganic, it's not something mineral, but it's also become biologic. So we create this iweather.org. It was a kind of climate for internet, like because we need to have this variation of light, to have bright light during the day and no light during the night, because if you don't have, you have seasonal affective disorder, you have some problem of sleep, and so this cycle is important for the body. And so if you stay all the day and all the time only with the screen of the computer without the natural light, so it could be a problem. So because at this time we say the window of the screen of the computer is also a kind of new windows. And so we propose to have a kind of light from these new windows, and we create this cycle of melatonin, of bright light and dark light, linked to different color. I will show after. So now there is for iPhone, you could download the iWeather, so you could use it in a personal way when you are on Mars or yes. So in the same idea, in 2001, I was invited at the MoMA in San Francisco, and we present this melatonin room, because at this time I think, okay, maybe now, because the idea to create a room was what is the quality of a room? A room could be a program, like a living room or a bedroom, or it could be like a symbolic quality of room, or it could be like plastic quality of room. And here I was thinking room could have also a kind of physiological reason. And so it was this melatonin room a kind of, yes, to create a room with physiological reasons. So maybe today it's something that maybe it's, and we could understand, but at this time it was something completely crazy. And this idea that the physiology could have an impact into the room. And so we know, it's another scientific that shows that the efficiency of the lights that block the secretion of the melatonin, it's around the green and the blue. Before it was more on the green. After in 2005 it changed to the blue. So now we know this is this curve. And after 550 nanometer, there is no effect on the body. I will see there is no effect on the melatonin suppression. So it's in this color that it blocks the melatonin. So everything is scientific. It came from, all my results came from nature or science. There is no mystic and no esoteric point of view inside. So melatonin room, it was this space with a very bright light, and you go inside and it blocks the melatonin, and so it was like a day, or it was like maybe it could be, you could interpret that like a living room, or because we say also if you block the melatonin, also it give more sexual libido, or so it could be a space with some interpretation, but the primary idea it is that it blocks the melatonin and it creates something a little exciting. In 2002, we represent Switzerland in the Venice Biennale, and we create this Hormonorium. And here, the idea was to work with another hormone. It's called erythropoietin. And when you go in the altitude, when you have a lack of oxygen, the body creates secretion of erythropoietin that produce more red cells that because you have a lack of oxygen in the organ, in the brain, and so this hormone multiplies the red cell, and so we bring more quickly the oxygen inside the brain. And so we realize this very abstract and simple minimalistic space, because there is nothing to see really, but everything was more in the invisible, because we have this very bright light that blocks the melatonin. So we reduce the level of oxygen inside the space from 21% to 14.5%. So the reaction of the body was not in the visible. It was not with the five senses. It was completely beyond the skin, beyond the body, inside this hormonal. So the choice, for example, all the material was choose with this purpose. For example, we choose to have the light coming from the roof, coming from the floor, because we get directly in the eye, in the retina, the light, because if you come from here, you are protected by the head and by the hair. And so you receive it directly. So, and it was 10,000 luxes, very bright, and so it blocks the melatonin. And we choose also plexiglass to let some ultraviolet through, because the glass blocks the ultraviolet. And so we work with. It was a very interesting work, because we work with to reduce the quantity of oxygen inside. Here, some endo perception. It's adrenaline or endorphin, and it was just after the Biennale in 2004. It was in the Migros Museum in Zurich, and because what we understand, when you have a lack of oxygen in the brain, what's happened? It's when you go in the altitude, you are at 21% on the sea level, and if you go in the mountain, the level of oxygen reduces, and you could see an alpinist, someone who rides at the sea level, and if you go up in the mountain, if you go in the Everest, in the high mountain, you become crazy. You have some hallucination. and you write, and you see some, you have some vision, and you heard some chime sound, and various, and if you, and what's happened is really in the brain you have a lack of oxygen, and so you have erythropoietin reaction and also adrenaline reaction, and so it creates some like drug effect in the brain because you react very quickly and very strongly to the climate, the variation, and if you read experience about near-death experience, it's exactly the same. The descriptions are the same. You see black tunnel, you hear chime sound, you have some crazy, you see some hallucination, and what's happened because when you die, the earth stops, and it means that you have 21% in the earth, in the body, of oxygen before, and when the air stops to pump the air, so it means that in the brain you have a lack of oxygen. It's 21%, 19%, 18, 17. So it's like going in the altitude in a very quick way, and at the end you arrive at 0%, so you die. And the black tunnel, it's exactly what's happened in the eye when you have a lack of oxygen in the eye. The vision reduce and become more black, and so all this mystical feeling could be completely explained by the oxygen reduction inside the brain. And so we produce in the Migros Museum this near-death experience space. So it was a space where you could go inside. It was 6% of oxygen inside. So you could go inside. You could maybe meet God inside, but maybe you could be dead also after. So nobody go inside, but it was 6% inside this place. Here another. It's a placebo paint. It was shown in 2001 in the Museum of Modern Art in Paris, and at this it was the same idea. It was the idea that the placebo effect. Maybe you know it's a real effect inside the body. It means that, for example, you could understand if you are a man and you like women, so you could if you see a woman, you are exciting, and you have some reaction in the brain that produce some neurotransmitter and some neurologic secretion, and this is the effect of the placebo. It means that when you think that you eat pills that could cure, save you, you create your own reaction in the brain that could be a kind of endo drug, and so it's why for the doctor the placebo could really work, because you could produce your own medicine inside the brain. And here we propose to create 2 rooms with this placebo paint. And in the first one, it was there is some ginseng inside, and so it was like in the like a sexual element, and the other was a blossom, orange blossom inside. So it was like a relax and a cool space. And so we produce this paint, so there is nothing inside. It was just because it was placebo, so we just write that there is some ginseng inside or orange blossom inside, but there is absolutely nothing. And some people go inside and feel, you smell orange, but or some other people say, yes, it's like this cheap perfume. But there is nothing, and so everybody begin to interpret and give his own idea of something that don't exist. But we work with a specialist of placebo in France for this project, and he writes that our product could have a real effect. So if you arrive into this white full of placebo paint, full of ginseng, maybe you could have a kind of libido feeling inside because you are informed by yourself with this placebo effect. Another also on the it's the same idea of melatonin. It works on the it's called diurnism, and this is a kind of reverse of noctambulism, because during the 19th century there is the invention of the street lighting. The first street lighting was made in London in 1812, and it changed completely the relation to the city, because during the Middle Age everybody sleeps during the night, and there is nobody in the street. In Paris there is only one fire, in a small fire, but the city was completely dark and black. And so it changed during the 19th century, and there is some invention of noctambulism, and people go to the go to the opera, go to the boulevard, and so it changed completely the way of living. And here we try, and this idea of noctambulism was very strong, because it was like, if you read Jules Verne or some writer from the 19th century, it was like to be against God, because God create darkness and light, and day and night, or winter and summer, but the human during the 19th century create the day during the night. So it was a provocative and if you read literature of 19th century, you could understand that it was a very strong decision to create the day, a kind of perpetual day during the night. And so my idea was to say, is it possible to reintroduce the night into this perpetual day, this artificial perpetual day in the city? And it was a kind of, because we could understand that this artificial light inside the city is a kind of provocation. Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, explains this. It's a kind of provocation. It's a kind of, you create against the cycle of God, you create the day during the night. And I was thinking, is it possible to reintroduce the night, so to perverse the natural, the artificial light into the natural night, and to create a kind of fake night inside the fake day, inside the natural night. So, so I use the melatonin effect because what's happened for the body, it's only with this in the blue spectrum of the wavelengths around 350 and 550 that it blocks the melatonin. After, there is absolutely no effect on the body. So you could have a yellow light, a very bright light on the eye, but it will not affect your cycle of melatonin. So it will be for the body like a night. And so we propose this wavelength in a yellow wavelength, and we create a very bright white room, yellow room, but it's look like a day because it's very bright, but for the body it's like a night. So it's a kind of, what you see is not what it is. It's a kind of like the winter beach. It's a kind to rebuild the night, but you keep only this physiological perception, and so it's a night. This is like this. It's not. You don't need to be black to create a night. A night could be a completely bright yellow light. And yes, and so we also produce some music. It was because there is Frédéric Chopin, the Nocturne for the piano. This form for the piano was invented not by Frédéric Chopin, but by John Field, an Irish musician. And he invented Nocturne for the piano in 1815. And so it was 3 years after London created the first street lighting. So it is for me the first really important moment that when humanity jumped from this natural cycle of day and night to a kind of artificial moment where everything become artificial and there is no more night, and also Nocturne for the piano. It is the idea you could play Nocturne during the day and you could have an evocation of the night during the day. So here we reverse the Nocturne and we create a kind of Diurne for the piano. So It's yes. Okay, and here something on the cone perception, light-sensitive cell into the eye. It was in Japan, in Ghost Flat in Kitakyushu. And so we know all the wavelengths. And human, we see only this part from 400 nanometer to 7 to 800 nanometer. And after it's infrared and ultraviolet. And because we see this color, because we have in the eye 3 cones. One cone receives the red, the other the blue, and the other the green. And so with these 3 cones inside, we recompose the white light and the full spectrum. But we don't see, we don't see ultraviolet and infrared. And so my idea was to say, is it possible to create a space, but not it's like Stanford Quinter yesterday say, you don't see with the eye, you see with the brain. So maybe it was the idea, is it possible to create a space not in the space, but in the brain? And so it was the idea to create one space for the L cone, if we want, that we could see with the L cone, another with the S cone, and another with the M cone. So it means that we will create different room, but not in the space, but in the not in the matter, but in the nanometric matter in the spectrum of the light. So it was a little this idea to separate the light, and here it becomes the living room, here it's the bedroom, and here it will be the bathroom. And so everything was on the same place. It's like a ghost idea of the 19th century. When they invent the ghost during the 19th century, there is this idea that the ghost, we see a world in the visible spectrum, but maybe there is somebody else into the invisible spectrum. And when there is some bug between these two realities, it creates the ghost, the phantom. And here, this is a little the same idea. There is 3 reality. On the same place, but not on the same wavelength. So, so the bedroom was here, the bathroom was here, but so we create these 3 functions on the same place, but not on the same wavelength. And after you turn we don't see something, but up. So you turn the blue light. And you see the bedroom, you turn the red light, you see the living room, and you turn the ultraviolet light, here you see the toilet and here, something like this a thermosensitive neuronal ionic channel. It's also linked to the feeling of what there is outside. And for example, we have the feeling that if it is warm or cold, it's from outside. But in reality, it came also from the brain, because I will not show this, but it was linked to a project at the Venice Biennale, where I proposed to create 2 platforms, one warm platform and one cold platform that generate a kind of convective movement in the section. And so it was built like this. And associate to these 2, the cold platform and the warm platform, there is some food. And because it's interesting that when you, it's here, I don't know. When you feel, if you have your hand and you place your hand in the water, you could understand if it is cold or warm, because depending on the temperature, it activates one ionic channel that go to the brain and activate a part of the brain, and you understand that it is 10 degrees Celsius or it's boiling water. And what's happened, it's there is different ionic channel, and it's for example TRPV1 or TRPM8, and if it is cold, for example, it activates the TRPM8 channel, and And if it is very warm, it activates the TRPV1 channel. And there is something strange that it's not only the heat that could activate the channel. It could also be a chemical substance like chili. When you eat chili or you press chili, you have the feeling to burn because it activates the same channel and activates the same part in the brain. So you have the real feeling and you become to sweat, and because it takes the same. And the mint, if you take some mint candy, you have this feeling to be fresh because it activates the TRPM8 channel, so it gives also the feeling to. So if you look to the history of architecture, sometime it was already used in the architecture field. So, for example, in Morocco, when it's very warm, so you don't use air conditioning, you drink mint tea, and it's a kind of internal air conditioning. You refresh yourself by drinking mint tea. And the chili it is used also in warm country because what's happened it gives a feeling that it's more warm than it is, and you become to sweat, and when you sweat, you lose some energy, so you cool the body. So it's a way to cool yourself by using the food. So it's really interesting to understand that the perception of what it is outside, it's not completely outside, it's also linked to the brain and to the thing inside. And so here for the Biennale, we produce some different candy, and we try to mix different gradient to get 22 degrees Celsius, like a bathroom, and 16 degrees Celsius, like a bedroom, with different ingredients. And yes. And I will finish with a project. It's domestic astronomy, and it's a perception, also a use of the space linked to the heat. So, for example, depending of your activity and the clothes, the temperature you need will be not the same. For example, and it's used in Switzerland in a kind of sustainable idea, because we want to, if we want to fight against global warming, we could use this kind of data, because it's a way to reduce the energy inside the building, inside the apartment, and to economize energy. And for example, in the bedroom, you could warm it at 16 degrees Celsius only, because you are inside the bed, so you are protected by the bed, and so you don't need to. And also in the corridor, for example, you could warm them at 15 degrees Celsius, because you walk and you spend only 10 seconds in the corridor, so you don't have time to become cold inside the corridor. So in the kitchen you move a little, so 18, and the living room it's 20 because you don't move. And if it is only 18, you become cold after 5 minutes. And bathroom, you are naked, nude inside, so 22 is good. So this is not this is Swiss recommendation. So sometimes people understand that it is mine and think that I am a determinist architect, that I'm functionalist architect, that I want to categorize everybody at different temperatures. It's not mine. It's just the idea, if you warm every bedroom in the USA at 16 degrees Celsius and not 22, you win 6 degrees of energy, so you reduce a lot of the consumption of oil and so this is the idea. So and my idea was to take this result as it is, because of course it's good to do it because you fight the global warming. And also to use another rule, it is the Archimedes law, the fact that the warm air go up and the cold air fall down. And so we propose to create a kind of contemporary apartment linked to these two elements, the body and the Archimedes law of the warm air that go up. And to use, because very often the warm air go under the ceiling and it's lost, because if you want 20 degrees Celsius, you turn the radiator at 22, and the warm air go up, so it becomes 22 there, but it's still 18 down, and so you turn, and so it becomes 30 degrees Celsius here under the ceiling, and it's still cold down. So, and the difference could be very important. So here we propose to accept this variation of temperature, and so this is a section here. So the warm air go up, and the cold air fall down, and we take the result of the Swiss recommendation and we place the furniture link to this position in the air, and so we get this image. And it's interesting because it creates a kind of new composition of the space and new way of living and new plastic, new aesthetic, following two. Yes. And yes, okay. So it's finished. Yes.
I wanted you maybe to quickly talk about, which is of a great interest to particularly to interior designers. I think these last images were very provocative. I had the opportunity to see them actually in real, and it really blew my mind because it really literally puts everything upside down or changes where it is. And it's such a beautiful illustration in ways of rethinking this. But what I wanted you to maybe elaborate a little bit on is this idea of program. Which in one of your writings or your lectures that I read about is really this idea of program in the French chateau or whatever. The idea of a bedroom or whatever was not really the name of the room. It really had to do with which temperature existed.
Yes. Yes, yes. When I start to be interested into the climate, I understand that the idea to have a different room with different function was something that come from the bourgeoisie from the beginning of the 19th century with the invention of the corridor with a living room, bedroom, bathroom, and before it was not like this, and also in the other country it was not like this. And there is two examples. For example, there is the Louvre. When the Bernini do the design of the Louvre for a competition, there is all the room were the same, so there is no distinction of function inside the room. And Colbert said to the king, asked to Bernini where the king will sleep, and he said it was not a question of architecture, it's a decision of the king, or he could sleep where he wants. Maybe it will change during the summer and during the winter, and if you think about, for example, the old in Europe countryside house, it was not. There is no function in there is a fireplace, and the fireplace was a kitchen, but it was also the living room, and it was also the place where the old people sleep, and where it became a little colder, it was another place. So it was a fire that generate the quality of the space and generate the program, the function of the use of the space linked to this. So, in the north cold wall there is the milk, and in the high dry warm under the roof it was to keep the grain, and so everything was linked to climate. And I also learned that in Baghdad, in the old in the old houses of Baghdad, the name of the room is not linked to a program, and it changed during the day. So the roof becomes the living room during the night, but the living room go to the basement, to the cellar during the day, and so the function change linked to the climate. And I think because all this here, I don't show this, but it's linked also to research about sustainability and all the new techniques with air renewal and insulation of the building and vapor movement. So I will present this in Princeton next week. So it's more but all this new need to be sustainable change the way to organize the space, and all these invisible parameters become more important. So I was thinking maybe it could change also this because it's only 2 centuries that we have this planification of function with room. So maybe it could change the way to think about house today. And yes, and so it was this idea. And in some project, I have no more living room, bedroom, but I have dry area and wet area, or more cold and more warm, and so it's. I think it could be more. It become maybe also more sensual and more. Yes.
Thanks, Philippe. That's a fantastic presentation of your work. This is more of comments, but maybe we can just discuss this a bit. Last night, Robert Irwin showed the painting by David and then explained the translation or the movement towards the total abstraction of Malevich. And there's this really, and then one can sort of play that into minimalism in sculpture. You know, Donald Judd talked about in industrial processes, his interest in industry and science and the reduction of form. In your work, there's this amazing then movement to content that is based in abstraction and minimalism, and by using these scientific processes, internal processes, biological processes. I'm kind of just wondering about your thoughts about the aesthetic of your work, issues of material, how those ideas start to come forward from your work.
For example, no. So I try to enlarge the field of research and the field of decision, how to take a decision about the choice of a material or the choice of a form. And so at the when I start with the Auditorium, for example, it was really a box without form and completely abstract. And after I understand that the warm air go up, so it creates some movement, some section, and after you understand that the choice of the color have an albedo quality, so there is some reverberation or some absorption, and so transformation of wavelength into heat or to, and if it's depending also of the material, if it is a if there is a conduction or no. So now I try to to choose material and to choose color and to choose shape and form linked to all this physical link, and so it's yes, it is in this direction that I try to work. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. That was great. I have a question about brain secretions, particularly this distinction between psychologically produced secretions and, let's say, physiologically produced as a consequence of the environment. And you showed. I was sort of struck by the placebo project versus some of the others that were more kind of environmentally driven, and wondered whether or not in the projects that are, for example, the melatonin projects, there is also the secretions that are going on psychologically, as you demonstrated in your placebo project. In other words, I'm going into, for example, I would be imagining myself going to the melatonin room. I'm thinking, well, first of all, I'm going to Philippe Rahm's project. Okay, so stuff is secreting. And then I get into the room, and there are a lot of people in there, and my ex-girlfriend is in there, and wow, more secretions. So I'm wondering how you, when you're doing the kind of physiological projects, which you're right to avoid the label of being a determinist architect. I know that's not your interest, but can you account for that when you're doing, say, a melatonin project, the interference or the white noise that comes from psychological secretions?
Yeah, I try. I don't know why exactly. I think because I came after the postmodern moment, and so I try to escape from all signification or all symbol and all narrativity. So in my project, there is never narrativity. It's not storytelling. It's not. There is no story. It's only pure physicality. And I don't want to work with psychology. I think I try. There is no psychology in my project. It's purely physical and purely. But and in this way, I was very interested by the Nouveau Roman by Alain Robbe-Grillet, this period of during the 50s and 60s, where they try to write without psychology, because they say the psychology will come after in the brain of the people and not at the writer. So this is the reader that will interpret with their own psychology what they will see. And I like this idea that as an architect you don't manipulate psychology, because sometimes it's wrong. It's it's so subjective, and so it's for me it's not so very interesting. And I think it was also during the 60s and the 70s. I think there is a lot of research about this, and for example, my color have nothing to do with the psychological color of the 60s, because it was completely wrong. All what they say, red could be exciting, or it was completely subjective decision. And here the green or the blue, and it's you could measure by in the blood. It's not subjectivity. So there is. I escape. I don't want to work with psychology, but I like the idea that psychology and fiction could arrive after. So I think architecture must not build fiction, but fiction could appear from architecture after. It's like in the landscape, in the natural landscape. When you are in the natural landscape is not dramatic, or it's not romantic. It's a natural landscape, and the interpretation, everybody could think, oh, I like this. I have a very good feeling with this landscape. So you are free to have your own emotion to the landscape. The landscape don't say what you have to think. And this is what Alain Robbe-Grillet say about the writing. He don't want to say, when he says that in Balzac, in the traditional roman, when there is a rain, it means that people are sad because there is a rain. And so he don't want to, he say, maybe you could be sad with a shiny, bright spring sun. So he don't want to, to inform emotion into the writing. He let the reader to be free of his own emotion, and so I like this position. It's not to manipulate people, but the people are free to interpret by their own the space.
I have a question about a lot of your initial research is, obviously derived on natural occurrences in the human body and things that naturally occur, but kind of stemming from what David had said, the ultimate outcome is very technological and designed. And do you feel that at any time you risk kind of in the ultimate design causing further separation between the original environment occurrence in the human body by the outcome of the end product?
I don't understand completely your question.
Okay. Do you feel that the end projects talk more about kind of connecting people back to their natural environment, yes, in a way, or talking about technology and putting people in kind of more of a dependent zone in a technologically created, designed environment.
Yes. No, yes, for me, I have no problem with technology or with technique. I don't think that because for example, a lot of new projects are linked with sustainability techniques, and it's completely artificial. So I'm not. I accept this situation, and I think that today, also with the global warming and everything, we are no more in a natural world. Everything is artificial, and also it's like Peter Sloterdijk, the German philosopher, says that everything now is an interior. There is no more exterior. It's because we change the climate, we change. Before we warm only inside the house, and outside it was the natural climate. But now with the global warming, we warm all the planet. So where is the outside? So it's so everything now is it's interior design, and so so I think it yes, and it's so it's why I made no distinction between the naturality or artificiality.
Could you talk a little bit about how you incorporated the scientific method into your practice of design and architecture? Was it a personal journey, or was that part of your education? Because when I see what you do and what we need to think about and how all of that informs any kind of design, especially interiors, it's a whole different way of looking at design, and we have to do what you're talking about. We have to incorporate some of these scientific understandings of humanity. So can you just personalize this for us?
Yeah. Yes. The interest into science is because I have no I have no knowledge about science at the beginning, but when I start to design, it was during the 1990, and the technology was very strong with all internet and computer, and so I start to be interested into this physical element. And in Switzerland, it was very easy, because I was in Lausanne at this time, it was very easy to communicate with the university and with the research center, because you could call the professor, you look to the name of the professor, you call, and very often the professor answered to the phone. So you could ask him what you want, and he answer. And so the communication was really easy at this time. And it was, I tried to do the same in France, and I call an institute, and I arrived to the guy who cleaned the office. So it was completely impossible to speak with someone. So it was, I think it was a richness of in Switzerland to have a very simple communication with everybody. And when it is always, I have first an idea, so I have a discussion with scientific to be sure that it is okay. And when we have the discussion, I understand something new, and it becomes a little the idea for the next project. And so it's always what I discover in the discussion with the scientific is never what I use in the project. It's always the next project. And so it was. Yes, it is a process like this, yes.
This question is also about the scientific process. Do you do any kind of post-occupancy evaluation of the environments? Like, did you take a bath in there, or do you have a metric way of understanding the environments from the occupant?
I don't know. Could you
Like-
repeat the question?
Is there any kind of post-occupants?
Of what?
Is there any way of measuring
Yes.
the
Yes.
response of the user or the response of the person within it that does
Yes.
evaluate assumptions or test them?
Yeah. In reality, yes. For example, in this project, we for the computer, there is a software we developed to analyze the temperature in real time. So we adapt every time the temperature inside. So here it's a real analyze each minute of the temperature inside. So for example, here we analyze the data, but for example, for the melatonin and also for the for the Auditorium, for example, we test. Yes, we in the real time we have to control everything because there is a lot of security, and we have to know if it go not under 14% of oxygen inside. So we analyze in real time, and the response of the body, I think it's more. It came from experiment than was made before, and of course it's not in this room that you could do. It's a real experiment in the university, but for the yellow light, for example, I was invited for the Dionysus project. I was invited in Eindhoven for a congress with all the people in the circadian cycle and melatonin, and there is a young team of Canada that show that it is a yellow light have no effect on the. So they spend, I don't know, 6 years maybe to analyze which wavelengths have an effect or not, and so they published the result in 2005, and we made the project in 2006. So it was very close from the scientific research, but of course it's not in this space that you could really measure the result.
I was wondering, could you change your relationship with the scientists and come up with questions for them that have not yet been answered? Because of your experience as an architect and thinking about these things, you could go to the scientists and say, well, what would happen in this case? Or
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think we have to be careful with this because I see a lot of, for example, young designers. They say that they change science, but in reality, there is, it's a joke. So it's no, because it's because. But it changed. I think, for example, when we start to work on the melatonin and all this biological relation to light. Nobody was interested to this, so it starts to be, yes, Philips or company like private company start to be interesting, and so they give money to this kind of symposium with all the chronobiologists of the world. And now, for example, in the EPFL in Lausanne, there is a new position with a woman that work on this biological. So it's in 10 years change. So when we show this project, nobody was. They think it's not architecture. It's not linked to. It's and 10 years after, it create a university academic position. So I think yes, we change, but it's yeah.
Yeah, you talked earlier in the introduction to your presentation about kind of deconstructing elements and then analyzing them and bringing them back up. And a lot of your examples that you showed are individual elements that are kind of shown. I was just wondering if you've done any projects or are thinking about doing other projects that start to combine these elements to create a total environment.
There is something about elegance, I think, and vulgarity, you say. When, for example, we say that if a woman wants to be elegant, if they have a mini dress, they should not have a décolleté, because she must have only one. You choose if you want to have a décolleté and you have a blue jeans, or you have a mini dress and no décolleté. Because if you have a décolleté and a mini dress, you become vulgaire. And if you have only one thing, you are elegant. And I think it's a little if you add too many elements, your project become vulgaire, because it's I think it's a rule of composition. It's and I came from Switzerland, and in the history of architecture in Switzerland, when I start to learn architecture, it was the time of Mario Botta. It was very famous at this time, and he worked his early houses. It was all based on the one shape, for example, the round, the square, the rectangle, and so it was one idea: how to do a round house, how to do a square house, how to do a rectangle house. And after 10 years after, when Herzog and de Meuron arrived, their first houses were based on one material: the wood house, the stone house, the Eternit house, the concrete house. And so it's a little the same idea. So this is a thyroid house, or this is the iodine house, or this is so it's one element that become one project. And I think it's a strategy of design to keep a kind of elegance inside the project.
Lecture where you'd see more architecture.
Yes.
And this is such a fantastic, provocative project because of its reduction in elegance. It makes me. I'd love to see the way this then turns into architecture or turns into housing, and how one establishes a space by using these very reductive elements. I also wonder, when this then takes on the issues of sight, and obviously, as architects, we're constantly, trying to maintain, let's say, a purity of an initial idea, or mediate between a multiplicity of different desires or necessities. So, can you speak to that a little bit, like how this would turn into an apartment, or how this would turn into this diagram, let's say, would turn into a house? And again, maybe we'll see that on April 11th.
No, yeah, I made a lot of projects using this research to do architecture. So it's I think I always use a museum or to do some research on the language and of architecture, and try to find new composition, and after I use this language for a building project, but yes, it will be the lecture of next week. Yeah, so you could come in Princeton. Yes.
I find I want to make an observation about this and what Robert Irwin was talking yesterday, and also even in the earlier discussion about trying to define environment, going to actually eliminating terms in our lexicon, which is a room is void until filled, figure ground, solid void, open space, all of those terms which what we've seen today, or if you use painting, perception, remove the frame from the painting, look at surface, or begin to monitor certain chemicals like one would do in paint or iodine, we begin to reveal the air in such a way that it is actually quite filled, and it's quite massive. And actually in the Hindu cosmology there is no term for void. Everything's full.
Yes.
And so when you start thinking about clothes, or you start thinking about mass, we move away from Botta's thick wall, or we just move into a whole different building system, both intellectually and physically. Because I'm also looking at we were talking about elegant, the relationship of clothing, and sometimes, you know, interiors is thought as sort of, you know, dressing the room, decoration. And all of those had a lot of relationship to living in the blue, green, red, and yellow in one level, and another one living into the notion of perception of color. So I see all this as, again, bringing great detail of materiality, and it's quite revelatory rather than being, you know, scientific or painting. So I compliment you on that, and I think your attempt to try to make it into something you can get your hands on to shape it, something we've known in the way of those desert houses in Morocco where we move up and down. But actually, there's something here, again, as you pointed out, all outside is the inside, given global warming. The intimacy is much more direct now than it used to be. And so you can get control points here. So I find your work quite fascinating in that realm and redefining terms.
Thank you.